deep in the heart of Arkansas, nestled within the lush wilderness of Devil's Den State Park. Two friends embarked on a camping trip they would never forget. What started as a peaceful night under the stars turned into a chilling encounter with the unknown, leaving them with missing time, strange injuries, and memories that defied explanation. But what if I told you that the most chilling part of their story wasn't what they remembered, but what they forgot? Devil's Den State Park lurks in the shadows of the Ozark Mountains, its ancient limestone bluffs standing like silent sentinels against the Arkansas sky. Local residents whisper about the strange lights that dance through the valleys at night, and the inexplicable phenomena that have earned this wilderness its forbidding name. Stories circulate about hikers who venture into its depths and return changed, their experiences locked behind haunted eyes. In the summer of 1977, two friends were about to discover why this place had earned its sinister reputation. Terry Lovelace, a retired Air Force medic whose military training had taught him to trust his instincts, arrived with his friend Toby for what they hoped would be a peaceful camping trip. They had no way of knowing their choice of destination would lead to one of the most terrifying encounters in UFO history. As dusk approached, they established their campsite in a secluded clearing nearly 3 miles from the nearest marked trail. The dense canopy of oak and hickory trees formed a natural ceiling above them, their branches twisting together like gnarled fingers blocking out the fading sunlight. Terry and Toby felt a profound sense of isolation that initially seemed peaceful, even liberating. They set up their tent and gathered wood for a fire, their laughter echoing through the trees. The forest absorbed their sounds with an unsettling hunger. As darkness crept in, the woods around them transformed. The familiar daytime chorus of birdsong gave way to something different, something watching. Neither man could shake the growing sensation of being observed from the shadows beyond their firelight. Little did they know, as they settled in for what they thought would be a quiet night under the stars, they were about to become part of one of the darkest legends at Devil's Den State Park. The midnight hour brought an otherworldly silence to their campsite. The crackling fire had dwindled to glowing embers when Terry noticed the first anomaly piercing through the canopy above. At first, he dismissed it as starlight filtering through the leaves. But stars don't pulse with an amber glow. Stars don't move with deliberate precision. "Toby," Terry whispered, his military training evident in the controlled tension of his voice. "Look up." The lights formed a perfect, triangular pattern, each point burning with an intensity that seemed to bore through the darkness. Most disturbing was the absolute silence. No engine noise, no wind displacement, nothing to explain their impossible presence. The lights began to descend, moving as one fixed unit, revealing something massive lurking in the void above. A cold sweat broke across Terry's forehead as the true scale of the object became apparent. It was larger than any aircraft he'd encountered during his Air Force service. The triangular craft possessed a metallic surface that seemed to absorb the firelight rather than reflect it, creating an absence in the night sky that defied natural law. Toby grabbed Terry's arm, his fingers digging in with bruising force. "We need to run," he managed to croak, but his legs wouldn't respond. An invisible weight pressed down on them, pinning them in place as the craft descended to less than 100 feet above their campsite. The air grew thick with electric tension. Terry felt his skin prickle, as if standing too close to a high-voltage power line. His training deserted him as primordial terror took hold. The craft now blocked out every star in the sky, its presence an absurd violation of everything he understood about reality. A beam of light, unlike anything they'd ever seen, erupted from the craft's center. It wasn't so much a searchlight as a solid column of light that touched the ground between them. Terry tried to scream, but no sound escaped his throat. His last conscious thought was of the impossible geometry of the craft's surface, patterns that hurt his eyes to look at, designs that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. When consciousness returned, The first light of dawn was creeping across the sky. Terry found himself in his sleeping bag, body aching as if he'd just run 5 miles. His watch, which had shown 11:47 p.m. the last time he'd checked, now displayed 4:23 a.m. Nearly 5 hours had vanished, leaving only fragments of memories that his mind refused to fully process. Beside him, Toby lay trembling in his own sleeping bag, his eyes wide and unfocused. Neither man could account for the lost time, but their bodies told a story of trauma their minds couldn't remember. Their camping equipment lay scattered, as if tossed by a violent storm, yet the trees above showed no sign of disturbance. The morning dew covered everything except for a perfect triangle of dry earth between where they lay. Something had happened in those missing hours, something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The morning sun revealed the true horror of their ordeal. Terry's exposed skin glowed an angry red, as if he'd spent days in the desert without protection. This was no ordinary sunburn. His flesh radiated heat and throbbed with a deep, penetrating pain that felt like it originated in his bones. Small puncture marks dotted his arms in perfectly straight lines, each wound surrounded by a bruised halo of purple and green. Toby's condition was even worse. His friend's typically calm demeanor had shattered, replaced by something feral and desperate. His hands shook as he frantically stuffed their belongings into backpacks, muttering under his breath about their ice and the procedures. When Terry tried to slow him down to make sense of what had happened, Toby snapped. "We have to go. They'll come back. They always come back." Toby insisted, his voice cracking. "I remember them, Terry. I remember everything." The memories began flooding back in violent bursts. Terry saw flashes of a sterile chamber bathed in painful white light. The beings moved with fluid grace, their elongated limbs too smooth and precise to be human. Their faces haunted him most. Where eyes should have been, they had only deep, black voids that seemed to reach into his soul, extracting secrets he didn't know he carried. Each flashback brought new waves of renewed sickness. Terry remembered the sound of their thoughts piercing his mind like icy needles, communicating in concepts his human brain struggled to process. He saw Toby strapped to a cold surface, surrounded by floating instruments that defied physics and sanity. The beings had examined them with a clinical detachment that felt more terrifying than outright malice. "The marks," Toby wheezed, pulling up his shirt to reveal identical puncture wounds across his torso. They collected samples. They talked about genetic markers, about compatibility, about coming back for more. They abandoned half their camping gear in their desperate flee from Devil's Den. Every snapping twig and rustling leaf sent spikes of terror through their bodies. The 3-mile hike back to their car became a nightmarish marathon, their injuries screaming with each step. Neither man dared to look up at the morning sky, afraid of what might still be watching from above. When they finally reached Terry's car, Toby broke down completely. "We can't tell anyone," he sobbed, gripping the dashboard until his knuckles turned white. "They won't believe us. Or worse, they'll think we're crazy." Terry understood. Who would accept their story? How could they explain the lost time, the impossible memories, the violations they'd endured? As they sped away from Devil's Den, a silent agreement formed between them. This horror would remain their secret, buried deep alongside the fragments of memories too terrible to face. But they knew, with devastating certainty, that something in that forest had changed them forever, marked them in ways that went far beyond the physical scars they now carried. 30 years passed, but the nightmares never stopped. In 2007, desperate for answers, Terry sought help from a hypnotherapist. Under hypnosis, the carefully constructed walls in his mind crumbled, revealing horrors his consciousness had locked away to preserve his sanity. He remembered the examination chamber's walls, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and pulse with their own inner light. The grid structures appeared to serve as both decoration and technology, occasionally emitting frequencies that made his teeth vibrate and his vision blur. The beings communicated without sound, their thoughts manifesting in his mind like ice crystals forming on glass. "We have been watching your kind," they told him. "Your military knows of our presence here." Their words proved prophetic. 2 weeks after his hypnosis session, a black SUV appeared in Terry's driveway. The men who stepped out wore civilian clothes, but their military bearing was unmistakable. They asked pointed questions about Devil's Den, about the craft's capabilities, about the being's methods of communication. Their knowledge of specific details Terry had never shared chilled him to his core. "We're aware of 14 similar incidents at Devil's Den between 1972 and 1992, one agent revealed before catching himself. He quickly changed the subject, but the implication was clear. The location held significance beyond its natural beauty. Research into the area's history unveiled disturbing patterns. Devil's Den sat at the intersection of electromagnetic anomalies. Native American legends spoke of sky people who descended from lights above the bluffs. The limestone caves beneath the park contained unusually high concentrations of rare earth elements, exactly the kind needed for advanced propulsion systems. Most disturbing were the other witnesses who began contacting Terry after he went public with his story. Their accounts matched details he'd never published. The grid patterns, the telepathic communications, the specific arrangement of examination instruments, the being's interest in human genetic material. The truth about Devil's Den remained elusive, buried beneath layers of government secrecy and extraterrestrial mystery. But one fact became crystal clear to Terry. Whatever force chose that remote Arkansas wilderness as their observation post hadn't just been studying him and Toby that night. They'd been studying all of humanity, and perhaps they still are, waiting in the shadows above Devil's Den for their next opportunity to reach down from the stars. Decades after that terrifying night, questions still plagued Terry's mind. The beings never revealed their true purpose, but their methodical examination of humans suggested something beyond mere scientific curiosity. Their actions spoke of an agenda, a long-term plan whose scope remains hidden from human understanding. The government's involvement raises even more disturbing possibilities. Why did they maintain surveillance over Devil's Den? What did they know about the entities that claimed this remote wilderness as their observatory? The agents' carefully worded questions and obvious prior knowledge hinted at a deeper truth buried in classified files. The physical toll of the encounter left permanent scars. Terry developed chronic autoimmune conditions that puzzled his doctors. His body's cellular structures showed inexplicable anomalies. Sleep became his enemy, filled with vivid recollections of procedures he never wanted to remember. The beings had altered something fundamental within him, changes that modern medicine struggled to explain. While skeptics dismissed his account as fantasy, other witnesses emerged from the shadows. Hikers, campers, and local residents shared similar stories of lost time and strange lights above Devil's Den. Their testimonies contained details so specific, so consistent with Terry's experience, that coincidence seemed impossible. Each account added another piece to a terrifying puzzle that spanned decades. Perhaps most chilling is the possibility that Devil's Den wasn't chosen at random. Something about this ancient landscape attracted these entities. The electromagnetic anomalies, the mineral deposits, the remote location all suggested strategic importance. But importance for what purpose? Every night, countless people stare up at the stars, wondering if we're alone in the universe. Terry Lovelace knows the answer, but it brings him no comfort. The truth he discovered in Devil's Den shattered his perception of reality and humanity's place in the cosmos. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about our own safety and significance. What lurks in the wilderness areas we consider safe? How many others have encountered something beyond human comprehension, their stories locked away behind trauma and fear? Most unsettling of all, if these beings continue their observations, their examinations, their gathering of human genetic material, what are they preparing for? The answers may be hidden somewhere in the shadow of Devil's Den, waiting for another unsuspecting visitor to stumble upon the truth.